Hey, my name is Matt Giordano, theyogimat.com. Thank you so much for watching. Today we're going to talk about how to stretch the hamstrings without tearing them at the sit bone attachment point. This injury is so common that we have a name for it called the yoga butt, and not the good kind. What is yoga butt? Yoga butt is literally a pain in your butt. It's either inflammation of the tendon near the buttocks where the hamstring attaches to the sit bones, or it could be a tearing of that attachment point, or this could be inflammation of the bursa, which would be called bursitis. A bursa is basically a fluid-filled sac that helps to prevent friction between moving parts, such as the sit bone and the hamstring. If it's bursitis and if it's just inflammation of the hamstring attachment point, that would just be rest. That would be good for you. And if it is actually a tear, you do need rest, and then you have to rebuild strength and integrity. Before I get into this, I want to acknowledge that some of you watching this video probably have a hamstring tear and are looking for ways to heal it. That being said, this video is not specifically designed to heal the hamstring, but rather to maintain its health. Some of these tips are still going to be highly useful for you, but you want to make sure you avoid stretching. If you have an injury, my recommendations are to start by resting. Once you have rested and the inflammation of the injury has gone down, then you can start strengthening. Once strength and integrity has been rebuilt, then you can start bringing back range of motion into the muscles. And that's where this comes into play. So whether you are healing from the injury and you're on the mend, or you are trying to prevent the injury from happening, this video is for you. To those of you that have never practiced with me in person before, this is going to sound like a lot of information. I recommend getting the video on theyogimat.com/hips to really help integrate these actions into your practice. But you can try them along with me if you're warmed up. If you're not warmed up, I don't necessarily recommend getting into this, as it will be a deep stretch. So I do have a chair here which takes some of the stretch out of the hamstrings and allows us to focus on the actions. So we'll start with our feet about hip width apart. That's a little nicer placement in the acetabulum in the hip socket than, say, feet together. And it makes it easier to apply these next few actions. The first step is to lean your body until your hips are over your heels. Most of the time when people stretch their hamstrings, they lean back, and as a result, the tailbone over tucks and the lumbar takes the stretch. And in addition, the calves don't get a stretch. So when we lean forward, we start to unlock the hamstrings and allow us to create the next action. So try this. Bend your knees a little bit and start to push the back of your hamstrings away from each other. What that action is internal rotation of the fronts of your thighs. Here's the cue that I find really makes this effective. If you push the mat apart with your heels, specifically the backs of your legs, if you push the mat apart with your heels, you'll start to feel the outer hips engage and the back of your hamstrings and sit bones feel like they move apart from one another. Make sure that when you do that, your kneecaps stay straight forward. So we have these actions. We lean forward into the big toes and we press the back of our hamstrings apart. And the third action is to move the sit bones up to the sky, which will, in addition to arching the low back, it'll pull up on the hamstring and start to straighten the knees. Now, straightening the knees is not necessarily the goal here though, so don't focus on that. Once you pull up from the backs of the legs and the hamstrings start to stretch, then here's where we can protect the hamstring and do what I was calling a facilitated stretch earlier, what I was telling you about. The facilitated stretch would be to activate the hamstrings while they are stretching. So how do I do the facilitated stretch? I have to move the sit bones back down towards the heels, but isometrically, which means no movement happens. There's just an activation in that direction. So I press my sit bones isometrically towards my heels as if I'm trying to tuck my tailbone, but no movement happens. Instead of movement, what I get is an activation of all the deep external rotators of my buttocks and the hamstring attachment point. If you don't feel that here, you may have to take it down a little bit further into your range of motion, into your flexibility. And then you can apply the actions again. Lean forward, step 1, press the hamstrings apart, step 2, and lift the sit bones up. Step 3, that's going to stretch the center of the hamstring, hopefully for you. And then to reactivate the muscle, to build the integrity right at the sit bone attachment point, think with your mind, think of the sit bone attachment point right where your butt meets your hamstring, right where you sit down all the time. Move it isometrically. Again, try to move it, I should say, down towards your heels like you're tucking your tailbone, but don't move your pelvis. As a result, hopefully you feel those muscles fire up. The key action to pay attention to in all of that is the movement or the isometric engagement of the sit bones back down towards the heels. That creates the facilitated stretch. It also, hopefully what you experience is the engagement of the attachment point itself. Again, all these actions can be very overwhelming, so if you really want to integrate them into your body, into your practice, definitely visit theyogimat.com/hips, where you can really get a 2 full hour practice of activating these muscles, not only the muscles at the sit bone attachment, but the outer hips, the inner thighs, the hip flexors, and you can take them through a range of standing postures, much simpler poses, so that when you apply it to poses like Uttanasana or even more complex poses, you can really have a mastery over these actions. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope that these tips really serve you and your practice. And if you're a teacher, I hope that it serves your students. Please subscribe to the newsletter on theyogimat.com so that you get these videos right when they come out. And also, if you enjoy this, please share it with others that might benefit from it. I would greatly appreciate it as well. If you have any questions about your body, about your practice, don't hesitate to use the contact button on my website and you can connect with me and ask me your questions. You might just give me inspiration for my next video. Thank you again for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.